Chapter 61. Rain knocked on the door to Liam's suite, and Dante let her in. He smiled, as usual, and pointed toward a hallway off the living room. A few steps down the hall, Rain heard Ethan's gleeful voice, and she followed the sound. "Where is everyone?" she called. "Mommy!" Ethan yelled excitedly. "We're in here," Liam called, at almost the same time his son did. Rain crossed the master bedroom to the adjoining bath and stopped dead in the doorway, caught between laughter and disbelief. Liam was standing at the sink with a white bath towel around his narrowed waist, a razor in his hand, and shaving cream on his face. Ethan was standing on the sink beside him, with a small hand towel around his waist, shaving cream on his face, and what Rain assumed was a bladeless razor in his hand. "Hello, guys," Rain said, trying to steady her voice through the overwhelming emotions that rose to her throat. "I shaving," Ethan cried. "I see that," Rain said. Then she met Liam's gaze in the mirror and lifted her brows for some input from him on how they ended up like this. "I exhausted," he announced, trying to use the same voice his son had used. Rain grabbed for the doorframe and laughed so hard her eyes filled with tears. Liam watched her, smiling at the musical sound of her laughter. "What did you guys do today?" she asked when she could speak. "Ethan and I went to the park that you suggested," Liam replied, drying off his face. "Ethan has lots of friends there, and their mommies were very happy to see him," he said, carefully communicating to Rain that the scene had been filled with relieved mothers who knew about the kidnapping and were glad he was all right. "Did you have a good time?" Rain asked Ethan, and he nodded emphatically, rubbing his face with a towel in imitation of what Liam had just done. Rain switched her gaze to Liam's, aware of the warmth in his eyes and unable to look away from it. "And did you have a good time?" she asked him, in the same tone she'd used to ask their son that question. "I had a very good time," he began, but Ethan's protest said otherwise. "No, you lie," he told Liam. "You hot today." Except for that, Liam qualified lightly. "Our son was convinced I should take my shirt off, and he was determined to help me take it off. Daddy hot, that's why." Rain dismissed that as an unsolvable puzzle and asked if he'd seen his friends at the park. When he gave an emphatic nod and declared that he had, Rain said, "I'll bet Ellen's mommy and Simon's mommy were extra happy to see you, weren't they?" He nodded, and in an automatic effort to encourage him to speak about what had happened at the park, Rain said, "What did they say when they saw you?" "They say, Ethan, hi," Ethan replied, grabbing for the can of shaving cream. "They say, Daddy, Ethan hot. Mommies all say, Daddy very hot." Liam's expression didn't change, but Rain giggled as she realized what must have happened to make their son believe Liam was hot. "So that's what happened. The mommies think you're hot," she teased Liam in the mirror, then noticed a flush creeping up his neck. Was he shy? She thought, finding Liam Thompson even more adorable when shy. Wordlessly, he leaned over the sink, splashed water on his face, and picked up a fresh towel. "Assuming I still have the strength to stand up tonight," he said. As if Ethan's words hadn't been spoken, "we're entertaining some guests at the hotel tonight." Rain looked at him in surprised dismay, thinking of the date she'd promised to keep with Dr. Jacob tonight. "Entertaining guests? Who?" "My sisters and grandma, and a few of my friends in the city who watched me make the announcement about Ethan being my son. I invited Neil and Mia as well, but they couldn't make it because Neil didn't want Mia traveling around again in her condition," he said. "What time is this supposed to happen?" Liam finally caught the hesitation in her voice and turned around to face her. "An hour from now, in my suite. Is there a problem?" Rain wanted more than anything to spend the evening with him and his family, but he should have checked with her first before inviting everyone over. Lauren's words came back to her, and so did Ethan's, and she realized that in a world of women who thought he was hot, Liam was probably accustomed to having women fall in with any plan. She suddenly felt uneasy, and the insecurity she'd suppressed when Ethan reported that all the mothers thought Liam was hot surfaced with force, almost drowning her. What if she told him she couldn't attend the event, and then he found another woman who interested him more than she did? "I can stay for the party, but I have to leave in 2 hours from now." He waited for her to explain why, and when she didn't, he turned and began putting away his shaving things. "If you're here for an hour, that will be enough," he said mildly. "Someone's picking me up," Rain provided lamely. "I can't cancel it. I've already done that several times." "Is he someone special?" Liam asked casually, too casually, Rain realized. "Yes, he's very special. But not to me. Next time, Liam suggested mildly. Put the end of that sentence at the beginning. Rain's brief bout with jealous insecurity disappeared immediately as she realized she wasn't the only one being insecure, and she laughed. Stay at the party for an hour, he said, his good spirits restored. That should be long enough for you to meet my family. Rain nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. I'll stay for an hour, she agreed, watching as Liam's smile widened in response. She turned her attention back to Ethan, who was now carefully wiping the remaining shaving cream from his face with the towel. You did a great job, buddy, she praised, kissing his forehead. Ethan beamed up at her, his small face glowing with pride. I like shavin' with Daddy, he declared. Rain's heart swelled at the sight of them together, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. Despite the chaos of the past few days, moments like these made everything worthwhile. Chapter 62. Rain's heart swelled at the sight of them together, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. Despite the chaos of the past few days, moments like these made everything worthwhile. All right, let's get you dressed, Rain said, lifting Ethan off the sink and carrying him into the bedroom. She set him down on the bed and began to gather his clothes. As she helped Ethan get dressed, she felt Liam's eyes on her, and she glanced over to see him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. What? She asked, trying to keep her voice light. Nothing, he said, shaking his head slightly. Just thinking how lucky I am. Rain's cheeks flushed at the unexpected compliment, and she busied herself with buttoning Ethan's shirt to hide her reaction. You're not so bad yourself, she replied, giving him a teasing smile. Liam chuckled, and the sound sent a warm shiver down her spine. I'm glad you think so. Once Ethan was dressed, Rain turned to Liam. I'll get him settled with some toys while you finish getting ready, she said. Liam nodded, watching as Rain led Ethan out of the bedroom and into the living room. She found a few of his favorite toys and set them up on the coffee table, keeping an eye on him as he began to play. She glanced at her watch, noting that it was already past 6. She needed to get back to her room and change for the evening. Just as she was about to tell Liam she was leaving, her phone rang. She pulled it out of her pocket and saw that it was Lauren calling. Hey, Lauren, she answered, stepping into the hallway for a bit of privacy. Rain, I just wanted to remind you about your date with Jacob tonight, Lauren said. You didn't forget, did you? No, I didn't forget, Rain assured her. I'll be there. I just have to attend a small gathering first, but I'll leave by 8. Good, Lauren said, her tone relieved. I was worried you might cancel again. I won't, Rain promised. I'll see you later. She ended the call and returned to the living room, where Liam was now dressed and ready. He looked up as she approached, his eyes searching hers. I need to get back to the room and change, Rain said. I'll be back by 7. Liam nodded, understanding. I'll see you then. Rain gave Ethan a quick hug and kiss before heading out the door. As she walked back to her suite, her thoughts were a jumble of emotions. The evening ahead promised to be both exciting and nerve-wracking, and she couldn't wait to see how it would unfold. By the time she returned to Liam's suite, the guests had already begun to arrive at the hotel. She was greeted warmly by Liam's grandma, Andrea, and the other guests. They made her feel welcome, and she soon found herself relaxing and enjoying the evening. Standing slightly off to the side of the living room, Liam proudly watched Rain mingle with his family. She was poised, unaffected, and sophisticated. In a matter of minutes, she'd recovered from the shock of finding out that Vincent Robert, the movie star she admired, and his wife were 2 of the guests Liam had invited. If she felt any awe, she kept it hidden. Though Liam despised the movie star, he wanted to make this evening special for her and went to such an extreme length as to apologize to Vincent Robert about their confrontation years ago. She chatted easily with his grandma and sisters, whom she knew. To complete Liam's satisfaction with the progression of the evening, the redhead he loved looked sexy as hell in high heels that showed off her gorgeous legs and a silky black dress that clung to her beautiful figure. Outside the hotel, lightning streaked across the sky, and thunder boomed while Liam prepared to get on with his plan for the evening. He'd invited his grandma today for a reason, and he would make sure that by the time he was done, Rain would completely believe that he didn't know about her and Max before he met her that day on the island, and that his feelings for her were genuine. In his heart, he expected her to cancel her date tonight when she discovered the meeting with his family. That's what he wanted her to do. However, he was prepared for her to leave if that's what she still felt she should do. He was prepared, but not pleased at the prospect. His grandma, who was never awed by anyone she met, including 2 presidents and countless celebrities, was gazing worshipfully at Vincent Robert and sipping a second glass of wine. Liam headed toward the group before the wine relaxed the old woman so much that she wouldn't feel her usual need to supervise social gossip and speak up when she heard an inaccuracy. Rain looked up at him with a smile when he walked up behind her and laid his hand lightly on the small of her back. He waited until there was a break in the conversation about Ethan, and then he said to his grandma, "Ma, did you know Rain and I met on the islands 3 years ago?" "No," his grandma said. "Yes, I know," Oriana exclaimed before Liam could shut her up. "And I know you liked her since she was a teenager. I remember you asking us to write a reply letter to her so she would stop sending you letters. So we wrote that letter that said, 'Stop sending me stupid letters with strong perfume. You're not my type. I don't roll with little girls with terrible, ugly skin.' When we told you what we wrote, you got so mad you didn't speak to us because you thought that was too harsh." "And I also remembered," Oriana blabbered on. "You've said enough, Ori. I was asking Grandma a question." Liam stopped her, though deep down, he was glad that misunderstanding had been cleared as well. Rain tried to look as if she was listening to what Liam's grandma said next, but her stomach cramped, and she winced as she realized that Liam hadn't been the one who wrote that letter many years ago, but she'd hated him so much for it. "Is something wrong, dear?" Liam's grandma asked, tipping her head to the side. She was seated in a chair, her white hair drawn into its customary bun, with pearls around her neck, her eyes bright. She was an icon in high social circles, and Rain had met her at various functions, but when Liam spoke to her, she positively beamed. Rain noticed. "No, I'm fine," Rain assured her. "I just realized something," Liam said, making his grandma beam at him. "You were standing beside me at that party years ago when Max Everett mentioned he and Rain were going to the island." His grandma remained silent, and Liam remembered his strict warning to her not to ever discuss Rain with him ever again after the night at that banquet when she began pestering of how he'd met Rain. She seemed ready to follow that rule now even though Rain was next to him, and she had spent time admiring Ethan and showering him with affection. She had to realize the situation had changed, Liam thought. But then again, she didn't know the situation before because he never discussed it with her, so she didn't know it had changed. He reached for a small plate of dessert on the coffee table and decided to focus only on Max and Rain, leaving himself out of it. "Did Max Everett ever buy a jet?" Liam asked. "I remember he mentioned wanting to, but then said he had to leave for Rain's father's funeral." "His wake," his grandma corrected. "He said his old friend's father had died, and he had to leave for his wake." She looked at Rain and said, "I remember because I was surprised he didn't mention your father's name." Having failed to get her to make a statement about Rain and what Max had told him that day, Liam deliberately imparted incorrect information in the hope that she'd be absolutely unable to resist correcting his mistake. "Since he'd already told me Rain's name, there was really no reason for him to tell me her father's. He didn't mention any names at all, dear. I particularly remember him saying that he was taking a woman down to the island for a bit of fun. Rain, dear, you look very pale." Rain put her drink on the table beside Liam's grandma. "I'm sorry to be abrupt," she said in a voice that sounded surprisingly normal given her emotional state of realizing she'd never meant anything to Max, not even enough for him to use her name or her father's name when he discussed them. But she'd believed him enough to ruin what she'd assumed would be a good relationship with Liam because she trusted him. "I'm sorry I can't stay." She turned to Liam, her green eyes dazed and almost accusing. I have to leave. We'll talk later," she added. "Rain has a date," Liam told his grandma and sister, who looked at him questioningly, hiding his surprise and hurt behind a glib explanation. "A what?" his grandma gasped. Rain made her excuses to the Thompsons and Vincent Robert, picked up her purse, and then realized that Liam was politely walking her to the door. "I'll come back as early as I can," she offered inanely. Liam nodded. Drink in hand, he stood at the window, staring down at the street. When she left him at the hotel on the island, the day had been bright blue, and he'd seen her get into a car. Now rain was lashing the windows, and he could barely see a foot beyond them. He couldn't believe she'd left. Her departure, coupled with his remark that she had a date, put a damper on the party, and when he turned around, his guests were standing up to leave. Chapter 63. After everyone left his suite, Liam called room service to have them clean up the remains of the party, and when they departed a half-hour later, he found himself alone in his suite, waiting for a woman to return who should not have left in the first place. The rain was coming down in sheets, and he stood at the windows, watching lightning brighten the night sky, reluctantly facing reality. If Rain really cared about him, then what she'd learned tonight should have relieved her mind of any doubt about his feelings and sent her straight into his arms. There was no other possibility, but he tried to think of one anyway as he shoved his hands into his pants pockets and stared at the storm. An image moved across the glass, and he frowned because it was slightly distorted. "Liam," Rain called behind him, her teeth chattering from the cold, her arms wrapped around her trembling body. He swung around, and as she gazed at him in mute misery and tortured regret, Liam realized why she'd fled earlier. She blamed herself for everything and needed time alone to think things through. Time alone in the rain. Smiling, he brushed a strand of wet hair off her cheek. "Use your words, sweetheart," he whispered. Her shoulders shaking with tears and laughter, she collapsed against him, wrapping her arms fiercely around his shoulders, pressing her cheek to his chest. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry," she cried brokenly. She'd loved him even before she knew what love was. She'd wanted him so desperately that the little things he did hurt her more than anything. She'd fallen for Max because he somehow reminded her of Liam, but now she realized nothing about him was like Liam. Max was a manipulator and a cheater. He was the one who'd played with her like a fool. Liam had done nothing wrong. Everything was her fault. Her lack of courage to communicate her feelings had messed up everything, and her foolish trust in Max Everett. Her heart had only ever truly beat for one man, Liam Thompson. Every beat of her heart was a silent ode to him, a rhythm of love that pulsed through her veins, aching with unspoken longing and undying love. Liam slid his arms around her, pulling her against his full length, and buried his face in her wet hair. "I missed you so much," he whispered. "I missed you every night and day." She shivered and lifted her face to his, and he touched his mouth to her parted lips, remembering their softness and texture, while his hands remembered her curves and the location of her zipper. She leaned into him, kissing him back with desperate fervor as the top of her dress slid down her arms, exposing her breasts. Liam intended to prolong this outstanding reunion for hours if possible, and he lifted his mouth out of her reach, curved his hands over her breasts, and watched the expression on her lovely face as he tightened his fingers on her nipples. She gasped and bit her lip, and then she demolished his plan to go slowly by remembering the location of his belt. She unfastened it before he could stop her and release his hardened erection. The bedroom was far away, the sofa was closer, but the carpet was softer, and so he guided her down, and she stretched out there beneath him, her body shifting against his. Liam closed his eyes, straining for control, his erection poised at the entrance to her body, but instead of entering her, he bent his head to her breasts, determined to give her the pleasure of foreplay. Her hands cradled his face, lifting it from her breasts, and she gazed into his eyes, her own filled with wonder, her long fingers tenderly brushing the hair at his temples. "Liam," she whispered desperately, "I can't, please." "No," he whispered hoarsely while she shifted her hips slightly, inviting him inside her, and his body thrummed like an aching drum. She nodded slowly, sure of herself now, and arched her back, torturing him as she couldn't hold on anymore. Trying to smile, Liam slid an inch inside her, and then another. His smile vanished as his body began to move against his will, driving slowly, rhythmically into her. His hands caught her thighs, clamping them to his, and he drove into her with fierce urgency. Her body convulsed, and he pushed her harder, forcing her with him until she twisted and arched and cried out his name. He exploded inside of her with a force that made him gasp and then drop his head against her breast in reverent disbelief. Summoning all the strength he had left, Liam rolled onto his side and pulled her tightly into his arms, smoothing her damp hair off her shoulders. "Will you go on a date with me tomorrow?" he whispered with a smile in his voice, and when she nodded, he covered her mouth with his for a kiss that led to another intense lovemaking on the carpet. Lauren reached out for a bottle of cold water and held it toward Dante, who had been standing guard the whole time. "Would you like a bottle of water?" she asked. Dante looked at her, smiled politely, shook his head no, and said in Mandarin, "You are very beautiful. I would rather have you." Understanding only the negative shake of his head, Lauren said, "I'll take that to mean no," and put the bottle back down. She glanced over her shoulder as Rain came out of the bedroom wearing her fourth possible outfit for her date with Liam tonight. The other three choices were draped over the sofa in the living room. Liam had taken Ethan shopping, and they'd been gone since this morning while Rain had been indecisive about what to wear to their date tonight. Too lame? Rain asked, whirling in front of Lauren, with Dante looking on from the kitchen island. No, but I like the red one better. Frustrated and uncertain, Rain decided to ask the opinion of a man who knew Liam's taste better than her friend. Reaching over to the sofa, she collected the other 2 dresses and held them up one at a time while she looked questioningly at Dante. For Liam? She asked. Dante grinned, pointed confidently at the black dress, and said in Mandarin, Liam will be in a hurry to get it off you tonight, and the red one has too many small, complicated strings. Okay, the black dress it is, Rain said. She added with a warm smile, using one of the 2 Chinese words she knew. Dante nodded and said, You have a mouth made for kissing, but Liam is like a brother to me. Also, he would cut out my heart if he thought I noticed. It must take a lot more words to say something in Chinese, Lauren observed, and then she said very solemnly, Rain, you're already in love with Liam again, aren't you? No, I'm not, Rain replied firmly. Dante's head swiveled around, his brows drawing together in surprised dismay. Yes, you are. Rain slumped against the back of the sofa, hangers and dresses suspended from both hands, and nodded. He's completely addictive. If I could pull him over me like a blanket and wrap myself up in him, I'd do it and still want to be closer, body and soul. And what makes it so hard is that I really think he feels the same way. You thought that last time. Rain shoved away from the sofa and looked at Lauren with a smile. And I was right. You keep forgetting that he wasn't guilty of anything we thought he was. What time is he coming back? Glancing at her watch, Rain said, He called to assure me an hour ago that Ethan and he would be coming back late. Lauren stood up. It's getting dark outside. I'd better get going to the hospital. Now that the authorities know Milo Thompson's somewhere in Zen, are you still going to stay in the hotel? Yes, Rain said, already heading for her bedroom to put away the clothes. She'd already put on her makeup and fixed her hair so she'd look nice when Ethan and Liam got back, and now she had time on her hands. Liam wants us here until the police capture Milo. I keep track on the news all day expecting to hear an announcement that he's been taken into custody. Mommy, come look at me, came Ethan's voice from the living room hallway. Already smiling, Rain hurried down the hallway from her bedroom to see what Ethan was calling her for. The sight of her son standing in the middle of the room, grinning expectantly, almost stopped her heart. Gone were his long curls and his baby clothes. His black hair was styled just like Liam's. He was wearing a suit, vest, and tie, and shiny black shoes that made him look like Boss Baby, his favorite cartoon character. And to top it off, he was standing with one hand in his pocket, and his other hand behind his back, posing. The sight of him made her heart swell with pride and contract with helpless longing for the baby he had seemed to be only hours before. You've turned into your favorite character, the Boss Baby. Rain joked. Got you present, Ethan said and took his hand out from behind his back, proudly showing her a bright red rose, which he delivered to her at a run. Oh, it's beautiful, Rain said, sending a smiling glance to Liam. He smiled back and said to Ethan, Give Mommy her other present. Grinning Liam's grin, Ethan dug into his suit pocket and pulled out a simple gold chain necklace that had a heart-shaped pendant. Rain's hand shook a little as she looked at the beautiful heart. She was being drawn deeper and deeper into fantasies of being a family, of being loved and cherished by the black-haired man who was already teaching his son to bring flowers to his mommy. She looked up to say thank you to Liam, but his attention was suddenly riveted on the flat-screen television, and he was striding swiftly toward it, turning up the volume. It was a news report about Milo Thompson. He was caught this afternoon. He admitted to kidnapping Ethan Thompson from the High Tower Complex apartment building, but he is blaming it all on Jason Wallace, who Milo claimed had talked him into kidnapping his cousin to get back at his uncle. Rain turned around and stepped back in alarm at the sight of Liam's clenched jaw and blazing eyes as he watched Jason's, whose picture was shown on the screen as the reporter talked about him. How dare that son of a bitch? Liam said between his teeth. Son of a bitch. Ethan echoed with what seemed to be his angry expression. Liam was taken aback and quickly made an unsuccessful effort to look calm for his son's sake. Then he walked up to Rain and kissed her goodbye as if he scarcely knew she was there. In the doorway, he turned and said, I have something urgent to attend to. I'll pick you up at 8. Chapter 64. Rain waited for Liam to come pick her up as he'd promised, but even though it was well past the time he'd given her, there was no sign of him at the hotel. She paced around the living room, glancing at the time every now and then. Ethan had fallen asleep waiting for his father to come tell him a bedtime story, and she'd even changed out of the dress she'd worn in preparation for their date night, which had obviously been ruined now. As she continued to pace around the living room, a sharp knock on the door made her stop and turn towards it. But before she could make any attempt to answer, Dante had gotten up from his sitting position and headed for it first. She followed on his heels, expecting to find Liam standing at the entrance, but was taken aback to see Will Parker and his assistant Ivan standing there with grim expressions on their faces. Their mere presence sent a jolt of panic down her spine and made her stomach knot. "Did something happen?" she cried out in panic, remembering when the detective had brought her bad news about Ethan's kidnapping. "Jason Wallace has fallen into a coma, and Max Everett is in the hospital with broken ribs and a damaged left eye, along with a dangling arm," Will said, peering around her into the room. "May we come in?" "Yes, of course, you can," Rain said quickly. "Where's Mr. Thompson, Miss Wallace?" Parker questioned the moment he was allowed inside. Rain knew before he finished the question what he was getting at, and her mind went into overdrive, thinking of ways to protect Liam from any involvement with Jason and Max's condition. "Did any of them say Liam did it?" she asked, trying to sound very scornful. "Mr. Everett didn't see who assaulted him, and Mr. Wallace can't tell us because he's in a coma after receiving a beating that almost cost his life. They both work out at a gym. They could protect themselves," Rain said, stalling for time, trying to think of an alibi for Liam when the inevitable question was asked. "Where is Mr. Thompson?" Will repeated more firmly. "I don't understand why you're looking for Liam. Did you find any evidence that it was him?" The assailant was wearing yellow rubber gloves, like the kind your restaurant kitchen workers use. "Oh, well, then there's your proof it wasn't Liam. He's been in the hotel all day. Furthermore, he's never been to my restaurant kitchen before. A waiter said he stopped in your restaurant this evening asking for a glass of water in the kitchen." Unable to think clearly with Will's eyes boring holes through her, Rain said, "Would you excuse me for just a minute? This is very upsetting. I need to use the restroom in a hurry." She turned on her heel and headed for the bedroom hallway, and to her alarm, she heard Will's footsteps on the carpet, following her far enough to note where she was going. Inside her bedroom, Rain leaned against the closed door, trying to think of a believable excuse to help Liam with this. She glanced at the big king-sized bed and had a sudden idea. She rushed over, pulled the covers loose, and tilted the mattress off the box springs so it was angled to the floor. She quickly adjusted two paintings behind the headboard to make them crooked and overturned the lamp on the nightstand so the shade was hanging off. Satisfied with the scene, she ran into the bathroom, soaked a washcloth in water, and hurried back to the living room, dabbing at her face as if she felt sick. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I just can't handle any more violence these days. I get ill just thinking about someone getting hurt, especially my poor brother. Anyway, it couldn't have been Liam because he was here with me until just a few minutes ago." "Where is he now?" Will asked. "He left a minute ago for an urgent meeting. The authorities took Milo Thompson into custody this afternoon." Rain widened her eyes in fake surprise. "Oh, really? We didn't know. Why didn't you call us to inform us?" "You didn't know," Will said dryly. "Then would you mind if Ivan had a look inside the rooms down that hallway?" "Not at all," Rain replied, dabbing at her face in earnest and trailing nervously behind Ivan. "Don't wake up my son," she warned. "He's in the bedroom on the left." Intensely serious about his job as Ethan's bodyguard, Dante followed right behind Ivan, scowling at him from the doorway as the detective quietly explored Ethan's closet and bathroom. "What's this room?" Ivan said, already reaching for the doorknob. "My bedroom. May I?" he asked, his hand already on the doorknob. Rain started to say, "Of course." Then she changed her mind and said, "But I really hope you wouldn't." She waited until Ivan gave her an "I can get a search warrant" look, before she said in feigned embarrassment, "Oh, go ahead." Ivan opened the door, turned on the lights, and froze. Dante crowded next to him to see what he was looking at and gave a bark of laughter, which enabled Rain to blush furiously and in earnest when she looked at Will. "What's wrong?" he asked mildly, looking from Rain to Ivan to Dante, who wasn't even trying to control his grin. Twisting the washcloth in her hands, Rain said shyly, "Liam and I, we spent the day and night in bed." Will cleared his throat and then put on a professional expression. "Then when Mr. Thompson gets back, tell him to give us a call." "And then you'll do what to him?" Rain inquired, her voice tinged with suspicion, fear, and anger that they dared accuse Liam of beating up two criminals who, in her mind, deserved what they got. "We'll have a look at his knuckles. If they aren't bruised or swollen, we'll know he's not the assailant." "Oh, good. Then you have nothing to worry about." "Yes, but it's also evidence that can't be hidden or disguised." "Why are you involved in such a small matter, Mr. Parker?" she demanded. He gave her a little grin. "Because it's my job to bring justice to every individual. And also because I'm trying to help Mr. Thompson," he said, turning to leave with Ivan following. "My men will stand outside the hotel to keep watch for when he'd be back," Will called out on his way out. After she was sure the detectives had left the suite, Rain struggled with her heavy mattress, trying to shove it back into place, but her mind was on Liam, and she was worried. She was worried for him, and worried for herself, too. In the kitchen, Dante listened to the instructions he was being given by his boss. When he hung up, he took several large plastic trash bags into Ethan's room and began quietly filling them with clothing and favorite toys. Finished, he stepped into the hallway, made certain that Rain was still in her bedroom, and then he carried the trash bags down the elevator and out a back entrance into the alley behind the hotel, away from where the authorities were keeping watch. He left them there, walked back inside the building while making a call to Neil's driver who had been driving them around. By 11 in the night, Rain was literally wringing her hands over her worries for Liam. She couldn't think of any reason for Liam to have disappeared without a call unless he was Max and Jason's assailant. Or, and this was a possibility, Liam made a habit of dropping out of women's lives when things got too complicated or feelings got involved. "Liam wants to say goodbye to you and Ethan. He's at the airport, and he has to leave on an urgent business trip. I'm supposed to take you to him." Rain whirled around in shock at the sound of Dante speaking English with only a trace of a charming accent, but her mind was focused on the painful realization that Liam was leaving. In the long run, she told herself firmly, it would be easier on her emotionally if he went away and stayed away. Trying to have a relationship with him was clearly impossible. At least this time, he was saying an official goodbye for Ethan's sake. Keeping that firmly in mind, she looked at Dante and said in an offhand voice, "Are you leaving with him?" "Yes. We'll miss you," she said. "I'll wake Ethan up. I'll bring the car around and back," Dante said, already heading for the door with his suitcase in hand. "There were a couple of reporters hanging around out in front," he lied. The limo drove at a steady speed through the city of Zen, heading to the airport. Rain looked out the car window, trying to distract herself with the view of the night city instead of thinking about her impending goodbye to Liam. Ethan was fast asleep, his head on her lap, and her fingers kept automatically searching for his curls whenever she laid her hand on his shaved and styled hair. She didn't know which airport they were going to because her heart was too heavy for her to bring herself to ask any questions. She felt like if she opened her mouth to speak, she might end up crying instead, so she remained silent. Before long, they arrived at a private hangar, and the car turned towards the large, brightly lit hangar. In front of it, a sleek jet with swept-back wings was waiting on the tarmac, its boarding steps down and its interior lights on. "I will carry Ethan," Dante volunteered, reaching into the back seat and scooping the sleeping boy up as if he were weightless. Partway up the steps, something interfered with the light spilling over the steps from the doorway, and Rain lifted her head. Liam was standing there, his tall, broad-shouldered frame filling the opening. This is goodbye, she thought, and the knowledge was suddenly so excruciating that she could barely breathe. He stepped forward and held out his hand to her. "I missed you," he said, smiling tenderly into her eyes. "Are you ready for our trip?" "Our trip? Where are we going?" she asked, confused and astonished. Instead of answering, he took his son from Dante's arms and went back inside the plane, where he sat down on a long, black leather sofa and drew Rain down beside him. Rain forgot that he hadn't answered her question as she watched him carefully place his sleeping son across his lap and gently lay his big hand on Ethan's cheek. His big hand, with light bruises on the knuckles. He lifted his left arm and put it around Rain's shoulders. "We're going to Mirage Mesa," he said without explaining what they were going to do there. Dante said something in Mandarin, and Liam leaned forward, peering out the plane's window opposite him, and picked up a telephone, talking in some language to the pilots, Rain assumed, since the phone had no dial or buttons. A moment later, she heard an odd loud sound from the rear of the plane. Then Dante came walking forward, smiling. He continued walking past her and settled into a big leather sofa at the back of their seat. The plane lurched slightly, She glanced out the window and realized it was starting to move. Rain had arrangements to make if she was traveling to Mirage Mesa, but they could wait until tomorrow. Right now, all that really mattered was that Liam wanted Ethan and her with him, which meant he had told her the truth last night about how he felt. The plane hurtled forward on a surge of power and speed and was airborne within seconds. "Why are we going to Mirage Mesa? Are we going to Mia's and Neil's place?" she asked. "Yes, we are going to them, and they are making grand arrangements for our wedding tomorrow." Rain was at a loss for words and stared at him as if she'd misheard him. He remembered a flight he'd made from the island to Zen when he'd thought she was lost to him. Then he slipped his hand into his jacket pocket and retrieved a little white box, flipping it open to reveal a glimmering diamond ring. To Rain's astonishment, he picked up the ring and looked her in the eyes with tenderness and affection in his dark orbs, leaving no mistaking his intentions as he said, "Will you be my wife?" Rain's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing with a symphony of love and hope. She felt like the world had stopped, with only Liam's eyes anchoring her in the moment. She was overwhelmed with emotions, her thoughts a whirlwind of memories and dreams. Every beat of her heart seemed to whisper his name, and she could feel the love she'd harbored for him all these years swelling within her, ready to burst. When Rain didn't move and was still staring at him, Liam felt anxious for the first time about a woman's feelings. He then added, "Rain," he called her name, almost sounding desperate. "I'm madly in love with you." A tear slipped down her cheek. In response, Rain lifted his hand and pressed his bruised knuckles to her cheek as she nodded, too happy to even open her mouth to say yes. Every beat of her heart felt like a symphony of love, joy, and the promise of a future she had always dreamed of but never thought possible. Chapter 65. A year after their wedding, Rain and Liam basked in the warmth of a perfect summer day, surrounded by friends who had become family. The picnic blanket was spread out under a sprawling oak tree, its branches offering dappled shade. The laughter of children mingled with the soft murmur of adult conversation, creating an atmosphere filled with joy and love. Their wedding a year ago had been grand, an event no one would ever forget. Rain had not expected Liam to send out the invitations to everyone and make all the arrangements without her knowledge, but he'd done it, with the help of Neil and Mia. Now, they were all seated together on the picnic mat, with Neil and Mia's 4-month-old baby girl being gently held by 4-year-old Melissa on Neil's lap. Liam sat with his long legs parted, Rain nestled comfortably between them, his hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. The baby bump was a testament to their love, and his fingers traced gentle patterns over it as he talked with Neil. His other hand held a sandwich, which he tried to coax Rain into eating as she'd started to complain about her weight and wanted to cut down on eating too much, which Liam was against because he believed she needed more food in her condition. "Come on, love, you need to keep up your strength," Liam said, his voice a tender blend of concern and affection. He lifted the sandwich to her lips, and she took a small bite before pushing the rest away. "Welcome to the team of husbandhood," Neil remarked with a smirk, watching his friend trying to coax his wife into eating more. "I've been through worse with Mia. The doctor would advise her to eat more, but she'd only nibble until I coaxed her. And once she started eating like there was no tomorrow, the next day, she'd cry and blame me for her weight gain." Liam chuckled, shaking his head. "Thanks for the warning. Let me give you a few tricks on how to get your wife to eat more," Neil continued, leaning in conspiratorially. "Deprive her of a night cuddle. While you'll be suffering yourself, depriving her of something you can't live without, just do it and see how she'll eat without you having to coax her." Mia glared at him accusingly. "Are you forgetting I'm sitting right here?" Rain laughed, turning to Neil. "Don't teach my husband any of your tricks, Neil." "Liam, don't listen to his tricks because none of them have ever worked," Mia said. "If you don't want to end up sleeping on the couch for 2 nights, heed my words and don't listen to Neil." She smiled up at Neil, who choked on his drink upon hearing her words. Neil didn't need to be told twice before he nodded quickly and said to Liam, "She's right. Listen to what my wife says, not me." He hugged Mia's shoulders and kissed her cheek to make amends before he'd end up being thrown to the couch and deprived of any intimacy tonight. Because the wives are always right. Liam smiled, kissing the top of Rain's head. "I never intended to listen to your tricks. I can't sleep a night without cuddling my wife." Rain leaned back against him, her green eyes sparkling. "And that's why I love you." Their peaceful moment was suddenly interrupted by a small commotion. Liam's eyes darted to the other side of the picnic mat where Ethan was being shoved by an older boy, who had been playing alone at their side but seemed ready to fight Ethan. Neil's twin sons, Nolan and Noah, sprang to their feet in a flash, ready to defend Ethan. The older boy took a fighting stance. However, before he could throw a punch, the twins had grabbed both his arms and were telling Ethan to hit the older boy. Before Liam could react, Neil was already moving towards them in long strides, sighing in frustration at his troublesome twins, who knew nothing but to fight. When they weren't wrestling each other, they'd be ganging up on someone. It was not a surprise to many in their school that the boys were short-tempered, and Neil always wondered where they got such temper from when neither of their parents was like that. Reaching them, Neil swiftly tugged his twin sons away from the boy they were about to gang up on, his voice firm but calm. "Nolan, Noah, what have I told you about fighting? You weren't just about to fight, but you were also trying to teach little Ethan to fight." Nolan scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. "Nobody has the right to push our family around. This is our play area, and he came here looking for trouble by pushing Ethan like he has the right. Tell him to go away and go find his own family area," Noah said, glaring at the older boy who looked a head taller than him. Neil sighed and looked down at his children, who were growing taller each passing day, his expression serious. "That doesn't mean you can gang up on him. We don't solve problems with violence." Ethan, his eyes wide and earnest, chimed in, "Uncle Neil, but he pushed me. You shouldn't support bullies. He should be punished, and Noah and Nolan can punish him." Liam and Rain, followed closely by Mia, who held her baby in one arm and held Melissa's hand in the other, joined them. Mia's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in the scene of her two boys glaring at the older boy, who was now staring at Melissa with a small grin. "Mommy, I know him. He's my friend," came Melissa's voice from the side as she pointed at the older boy who looked to be 7 or 8 years old. "He gave me candy in our building," she said, referring to the hotel they were staying in for vacation. Neil's eyes immediately narrowed at that, his fatherly protective instinct flaring upon hearing that the boy was his daughter's friend. He'd been friends with Mia since childhood, where he was older than her, and he understood the look in the boy's eyes as he stared at his daughter. "Not on his watch." "Oh no, he didn't. What's your name?" Neil asked the boy strictly. The boy cleared his throat and bowed his head slightly in respect before he said, "My name is Jamal Walker. My parents and I stay in the next suite to the Galveras, sir." "And why are you here picking a fight, Jamal?" Mia asked calmly as she locked eyes with her daughter's shining brown eyes. "I wasn't picking a fight. I was making a lady's toy car for Melissa when this boy tried to take it, so I pushed him away. And then the two look-alike boys wanted to beat me up for it," Jamal said, glaring at the twins. "Melissa doesn't want your car. She's too young to have a boyfriend. Go look for someone your age and don't bother us again," came Nolan's warning, with Noah nodding in agreement and Ethan chiming in with a firm, "Yes." "Go away. Don't tell him to go away," said Melissa as she slid her hand away from her mother's and went to stand in front of Jamal. However, knowing that her father would never refuse her anything, Melissa looked up at him and pleadingly asked, "Can Jamal sit with us, Daddy? I won't be his girlfriend now until I am big. I will only be his friend." Neil looked ready to refuse and throw the boy away to wherever he said he came from, but Mia pinched his arm and warned him with her eyes not to dare refuse. Neil leaned down to her ears and whispered, "Are you kidding me? Our little princess is too young to talk of having a boyfriend. This boy is way older. And I wasn't too young to be friends with you when we were younger?" "I was 6 and you were 12, Mia pointed out. "Uncle Neil, don't let him join us. He's mean. Let Nolan and Noah hit him," Ethan said. Liam quickly placed a calming hand on his son's shoulder. "Ethan, we don't hit back. We talk things out. Remember what we taught you?" Ethan nodded, his eyes dropping to the ground. "But he pushed me first." Rain, her voice soft and soothing, added, "Sometimes, it's braver to walk away and tell an adult than to fight back. Let's all try to be kind to each other." Neil turned to Jamal, who was now looking a bit sheepish. "Is there something you want to say?" The boy mumbled, "Sorry. I didn't mean to push him." Nolan scoffed, "Yeah, right. Apologize to us as well, or you will not join us even if our sister wants you to." "Nolan, you two were the ones in the wrong. You seemed ready to beat him up. Now apologize to him," Mia said, trying to sound strict. "But, Mom, apologize," she said calmly. Stomping their feet, the two apologized at the same time. "We are sorry." And then Melissa grinned and ran to hug both of her best brothers while saying, "Be nice to Jamal, and I won't tell you to piggyback me again." "Really? You won't bother us for a piggyback again? Noah asked, sounding delighted at the thought that their precious little sister, who they could never say no to, had finally agreed to stop bothering them for a piggyback. They didn't have to be told twice. They both wrapped their arms around Jamal's neck and said, "You will be our buddy for as long as you don't cross the boundaries. Let's go eat some sandwiches," Noah announced as they ran to the mat with several delicious meals spread on it. As the tension melted away, the children resumed their play, their laughter ringing out once more. Liam pulled Rain closer, kissing the top of her head. Neil wrapped his arm around his wife and leaned down to kiss her cheek while whispering, "My eyes will be on that Jamal until the end of our vacation." The group returned to the picnic mat, settling back into their relaxed positions. The day continued with stories, jokes, and the shared joy of being together. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the scene, it was clear that these moments were the ones they would cherish forever. And as the stars began to dot the twilight sky, each couple exchanged a glance filled with love and promise. This was their happy ending, surrounded by the people they loved most, with a future that held endless possibilities. The story of Rain, Liam, Neil, and Mia might be coming to an end, but their love story would continue to echo in the laughter of their children and the memories they had created. It was a beautiful reminder that love, in all its forms, was the greatest adventure of all. The end.